Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Does a husband spend the weekend with his favorite wife or with his cheating wife? All through today's story, that will be the question. Enjoy the show! Water, water, where will you meet your Waterloo? Every puppy has his day, everyone has to pay, everyone must meet their Waterloo. Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Tom or Stone to his friends and family, was looking forward to the upcoming weekend as he drove home from work that Monday. Memorial Day had just passed, but he and Janice, his wife of 5 years, were invited to spend a 4-day weekend at the country estate of her boss, Darren Hansen, a senior partner at Remington Law Group where Janice worked as a paralegal. Stone already had Monday off, so he took the day off to free up Friday. His boss, who was also his father, was kind enough to let him leave early on Thursday so he could pack up and hit the road. The drive to Darren's estate would easily take 3 hours, given the motorway traffic and the nature of the narrow, winding roads leading to Darren's estate. Stone had high hopes for the weekend, but the last 2 months had not been the best for his relationship with Janice. She had become somewhat sullen and snapped at him for no apparent reason. As for intim, forget it. What was a frequent hobby 3 or 4 nights a week had given way to a perhaps reluctant once every 2 weeks exercise. Being a caring, loving husband, Stone reached out to Janice, hoping to help her overcome whatever was troubling her. But she simply brushed him off, saying that she would deal with it herself. To make matters worse, Janice constantly rejected his attempts to initiate physical contact, and now often recoiled from him when he tried to hug or comfort her. The situation became increasingly unbearable for him, and he wondered if she was having an affair. Then she told him they had been invited to her boss's country estate for the weekend to celebrate her promotion. Promotion? Tom asked, confused. You never said anything about a promotion. How long has this been in the works? For a couple of months already, Janice answered. Sorry, I should have told you earlier. So that's why you've been so distant lately? I think so. I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to be so harsh with you. I've had a lot on my mind lately, she answered repentantly. Tom smiled as he pulled her into his arms, saddened when she flinched slightly. I can imagine, he said. And here I was worried you might be having an affair. He felt her tense slightly but then relax. Of course not, Janice said quickly. I would never do anything like that to you. Tom heard the words, but something in her tone sounded unconvincing. I'm glad to hear that, Tom forced himself to say, despite his growing anxiety, because you know that's the one thing I simply wouldn't tolerate. I know, Janice said quietly. So, do you think you can get off early on Friday? 4 days in nature would do us both good. Certainly. I have plenty of free time. We can leave on Thursday after I finish work, if you want. That would be wonderful. I'll let Darren know, and everything will be packed by the time you get home, she said. I promise this will be a weekend you will never forget. Stone thought about these words as he poured gas into his new 4-wheel drive Ford F-150 pickup. A weekend he'll never forget. He could only hope she meant it in a good way, but a part of him had mixed feelings, especially after the rather serious conversation he had earlier with his father and uncle. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and headed into the house. True to her word, Janice had everything packed and ready to be loaded onto the truck. He checked his bags, making sure his belongings were packed and ready to go. He was impressed that Janice even packed his toiletries in his travel bag. Then he took the other bags. You've got enough stuff here for a week, he joked, as she walked into the room wearing cut-off shorts and a t-shirt. I thought we were just going out of town for the weekend. You know I like to prepare for everything, she joked back. Why don't you load this stuff up, and I'll finish here. He saw that she had sandwiches on the counter and was packing a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the road, as she usually did when they took weekend day trips. Sounds tempting, he said with a smile. Maybe this will be a good weekend after all. He loaded everything into the truck, helped Janice finish packing the groceries, locked up the house, and headed out for what he fervently hoped would be a nice weekend out of town. This weekend promises to be the best of my life, Janice admired, while Tom drove the car. Trust me, you'll have a great time, Tom replied, hoping she was serious. It took Tom longer than he planned to get out of town due to an accident on the freeway that brought traffic to a screeching halt. As a result, they were almost 2 hours behind schedule, but this did not affect Janice's cheerful mood, which pleased Tom. He topped up the gas tank once more as he pulled onto the road that would lead them to Darren's estate. They drove down the windswept road through the rolling woodland. It was well after midnight when they reached the gate leading to Darren's spacious 2-story home. Janice was given the gate code, and soon they arrived at a huge brick mansion. "Damn, this is a big house," Tom exclaimed. 3 men in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck as Tom turned off the engine. Tom was surprised. Why do they need sunglasses in the dark? "I can get our luggage," Tom said, opening the back door of the pickup. "Anyway, thank you." "No, sir, this is our job," said one of the men in a voice devoid of humor. The other man extended his hand. "Keys, sir." "I need to park your car," the second man said. "Please do," Tom said grimly, handing his keys to the second man, noting the characteristic bulge on his jacket indicating he was armed. The other 2 men unceremoniously grabbed his luggage and disappeared into the darkness without a word. "Thank you," Tom said automatically, watching as the men easily carried the heavy bags up the steps. "Are you walking?" Janice asked. "Yeah, sure." "I'm coming," Tom replied, following Janice and the 2 men up the stairs, wondering why they needed to be armed. Something about it just didn't seem right. "Oh, here you are. I hope you had a safe trip," a tall man with dark, curly hair boomed as they entered. Tom recognized the man as Darren Hansen. He had met Darren several times at corporate holiday events. As Tom watched, Janice managed a hug, then turned to Tom. "Thomas, glad to see you again." "I'm Darren Hansen," he introduced himself, holding out his hand. "Welcome to my humble home." "Thank you." "It's nice to see you again, Mr. Hansen," Tom said, shaking Darren's hand. "No need to be so formal, Tom. Can I call you Tom?" "I have a feeling we'll be seeing more of each other now that your wife has been promoted," Darren said with a slight smile. "Of course," Tom replied. "I'm sorry we're late. There was an accident on the freeway," Janice explained. "That's what I heard," Darren said. "I'm just glad you arrived safely." "Are the others here?" Janice asked. "Others?" Tom didn't know there would be others here. "Yes, they're all here. Unfortunately, they've all decided to turn in early. We wanted everyone to be well rested for tomorrow's celebration," Darren replied. The man who took Tom's keys came back through the front door and returned them. "Thank you," Tom said, putting the keys in his pocket. By this time, the 2 men who had taken their luggage had returned from the second floor. "Harold, take the Jacksons to their room, if you would," Darren ordered. "Yes, sir," said one of the big guys. "We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning," Darren said. "Pleasant dreams." "Thank you," Janice said quietly, modestly lowering her eyes. Tom noticed but didn't say anything. He simply filed it away in his mind. Maybe Dad was right, he thought. This seems odd. "Please, Harold," commanded the voice, dead and creaky. Tom and Janice followed the man up a spiral staircase and down 2 hallways before stopping at a locked door. He pulled out the key card and held it up to the reader. Tom heard the lock click open. Harold opened the door and motioned for them to enter. "Oh my God," Janice breathed as they stepped inside. The room was spacious and well-furnished, with a private bathroom featuring a double vanity and a large TV monitor on the wall opposite the double bed. A gas fireplace took up most of one wall. "It's very nice here," Tom said with feigned cheerfulness, looking around. "I'm glad you approve," said Harold. He pulled out 2 key cards, one of which he handed to Janice and the other to Tom. "These are your room keys. Please keep them with you at all times. Breakfast will be served tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. "Good night," Janice replied as Harold left the room, closing the door behind him. "This is a very nice room," Tom said, walking around and taking inventory. "Yes, that's true," Janice agreed as Tom began hanging his clothes in the closet. Janice put her things away, but Tom noticed that she simply hung the bag of clothes in the closet without taking out the clothes first. "So, who are these other people that Darren said would be here?" he asked. "Oh, Just some bigwigs from the company, Janice answered without looking at him. In this new position, what exactly is it? Tom followed suit. I'm Darren's new executive assistant, Janice told him. This position comes with a significant salary increase, but from time to time, I will have to travel. Does it suit you? As long as it doesn't interfere with our lives, said Tom. You know we talked about having children. I know, but I might have to put it off for a while, Janice said quietly. At least until I get comfortable in my new position. What time frame are you talking about? I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a little longer, she asked. I know this job is very important to you, Tom replied neutrally, wondering what exactly the position entailed and knowing that they weren't getting any younger. You have no idea, Janice told him. This is a huge step for me. All I ask is a little time and patience. Fair enough, Tom said, hugging his wife. You know that I'm very proud of you, don't you? Really? Janice asked in a quiet voice. Of course, he answered, kissing her on the lips. I love you, Janice. Never forget this. I love you too, Tom, she replied after they climbed into bed and turned off the light. Tom reached for Janice, but her eyes were closed, and she appeared to be asleep. He sighed, as this had been her habit for the past 2 months. Frustrated, he turned on his side and fell asleep. The sky was clear, dark blue without a hint of a cloud. The sun was high, and a light breeze was blowing from the south. Suddenly, the sky darkened and became clouded with large, threatening clouds. The light breeze turned into a sharp wind that became stronger every moment. There was a dull rumble as the sky darkened and clouds gathered. There was a brief flash of lightning in the distance as the storm clouds thickened and the wind picked up. A sudden flash of lightning struck the ground right at his feet. Tom had this dream many times, except for the beating heart, and every time he experienced this, someone he knew died within the next 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was hit by a drunk driver and died instantly. The year before, his mother had a stroke just 12 hours after he slept and died 24 hours later without regaining consciousness. Tom sat up in bed, sweat rolling off his body. He looked at the digital clock on his bedside table and saw that it was 4:15 a.m. Even though it was very early in the morning, Tom knew he had to contact his father. Tom grabbed his phone from the bedside table and noticed that it had no connection. He climbed out of bed carefully so as not to wake Janice, put on his trousers and t-shirt, then put on his boots. Grabbing his key card, he opened the door to find one of Darren's armed guards at a small desk in the hallway. A man in a dark suit and glasses looked up when Tom opened the door. Any problems, Mr. Jackson? Asked the large man. I need to use the phone, but there's no cell service here, Tom said. Who are you going to call? I need to call my father, this is important, Tom told him. This way, sir, said the man, standing up. Tom followed him into a smaller room off the corridor. You can use this phone, he added, pointing to the phone on the small table next to the chair. Just dial 9 for an outside line first. Thank you, Tom said, sitting down in a chair. He started calling his father's number and saw the man standing in the doorway. Can I have some time alone, please? Of course, said the guard, turning away from the door. Tom couldn't believe the man's sudden appearance. Why was he armed? He finished dialing the number and began to wait. His father answered after the third ring. Hello, who is this? Asked his father. Hi Dad, it's me, Tom. Sorry for calling so early, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I was in the middle of a very pleasant dream, remembering your mother, but I'm fine. Tom, did you have another one of your dreams? Yes, Tom said quietly. He heard his father sigh on the other end of the line. The same one you had before Andy's accident? Asked his father. Exactly the same, said Tom. Understood. Thanks for letting me know, son. I'm fine, but I'll keep my eyes open. Why don't you go back to bed? Fine, I will. Thanks, Dad. I just wanted you to know, Tom told him. I appreciate it, son, but I'm fine, I promise. Keep in touch with me for some time, his father promised. Remember what I said, And watch your back." They finished the conversation, and Tom returned to his room. "Everything is fine?" he asked the guard. "Yes, everything is fine, thank you," Tom said, before opening the door to his room. He undressed and climbed back into bed, and Janice made a sound, turning to face him. "Where did you go?" "Is everything okay?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, everything is just fine. I had to call my dad," Tom said. "Oh," she made a sounds, before rolling over onto her side again. Tom could tell by her breathing that she had fallen asleep again. He closed his eyes, but sleep eluded him for another hour as he continued to think about the disturbing dream. Tom got out of bed at 6 a.m. and went to the bathroom to complete his morning routine. Afterward, he took a quick shower, then changed into clean jeans and a polo shirt. Janice followed him into the bathroom, opening the blinds. Walking over to the nightstand, Tom picked up his watch and wallet and looked out the window. He noticed wrought iron bars attached to the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no platform, and the concrete driveway had to be at a height of at least 8 meters. Looking outside, Tom saw a helicopter land in an area at least 50 meters from the house. He hadn't seen it before, but it was dark last night when they arrived. He also noticed guards carrying what looked like rifles over their shoulders. Tom couldn't help but wonder, was Darren expecting trouble? "Are you ready for breakfast, honey?" Janice asked as she came out of the bathroom. "Ready as ever," Tom said, checking his wristwatch. "What happened last night?" she asked. "Another dream," said Tom. "You mean like before your brother was killed?" "Yes, exactly the same. I called my dad to make sure he was okay." "How is he?" she asked. "Great. I caught him in the middle of his sleep, I bet," Janice giggled, which seemed vaguely unsettling to him as she finished getting dressed. "Come on, let's go downstairs and have breakfast." "I'm starving." "Don't forget your cane," she reminded Tom. The cane was a gift from his father given to Tom after he left the hospital many years ago. While serving in Iraq, the Humvee he was in was hit by an enemy RPG. Tom spent months in surgery and rehab and was eventually discharged for medical reasons. Luckily, doctors saved Tom's leg, but he had to have his left hip replaced. The rehabilitation center helped Tom learn to walk again, and the cane significantly eased his mobility. Although he could now move normally, he still experienced pain after walking for a long time, so he continued to use his father's gift. They arrived at Darren's table to find 3 more men and a woman waiting for them. Tom had briefly met these men before and knew that they were the heads of Darren's law firm, although he could not remember their names. He had never seen or met this woman before. "Everyone, I would like to introduce my husband, Thomas Stonewall Jackson," Janice announced. Tom shook hands with the others. "Stonewall?" "Yes, that's a rather unusual name," noted Glenn Oldman, one of the company's leaders. "My parents were big Grand Ole Opry fans back in the day, so they named me after their favorite country and western singer from the 50s and 60s, Tom answered. "Dad used to joke that it was either that or Michael Stonewall Jackson." "Yes, I think I remember that name," Glenn answered with a smile. "He died about 10 years ago, didn't he?" "That's what I heard," Tom answered. The woman smiled as Tom took her hand. "Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you." "I'm Eve Carson," she said. "Nice to meet you, Miss Carson. Please call me Tom. I hope you heard at least a few good things." "So, what do you do at the firm?" asked Tom. "I'm responsible for training and recruiting personnel," Eva told him. "And please feel free to call me Eve. I've heard a lot of good things, and I have a feeling we'll be spending a lot of time together this weekend." "About?" asked Tom. "Why is this?" "With Janice's new position, there will be a lot of changes in your life," Darren said before Eve could answer. "She's here to help you adjust, adapt." "Why should I accommodate my wife's promotion?" Tom asked, more than worried. He looked at Janice, expecting an explanation, but none came. "It's complicated," Darren stated bluntly. "Let's have breakfast first, okay? Maybe we can get to know each other a little before we get to the point." They sat down as Darren's staff wheeled carts into the room. As Tom watched, they placed dishes of eggs, bacon, toast, and fruit in front of each person. Another employee walked around the table, pouring coffee into cups. Tom also noticed the armed guards who had taken up positions on either side of the door. "So, Tom, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?" asked Rick Harmon, another executive director. "Janice says you were some kind of soldier or something." Tom looked at Janice before answering. He told her a little about his service, but it slipped her mind. As far as she could tell, everyone who wore the green uniform served in the military. "I served in the army, but I was never a soldier," Tom answered before taking a bite of his omelet, which he found delicious. "Oh, who are you then?" Rick asked, looking at Janice. "I served in the Marine Corps," Tom answered. "Thank you for your service," Darren said. "What did you do in the Marine Corps, if you don't mind me asking?" "Not at all," said Tom. "I was a scout sniper. I was assigned to the intelligence unit of the armed forces, where I was wounded." "Scout sniper, huh?" Ryan Jones, the third executive at the table, said thoughtfully. Tom noticed how the other executives and security personnel looked at each other before answering. The looks began to express concern, and Tom wondered what was going on here. Although I haven't had to do this for several years, the military part of his consciousness reproached itself. Did he give away his position or warn them? "It's interesting that you never told us about this, Janice," Darren said with a slight strain in his voice, looking at Tom's wife, who was blushing slightly. "It's not Janice's fault," Tom said before Janice could speak. "I never told her exactly what I did in the service, partly because some of it is still classified and partly because this is a period of my life that I would rather forget." "But now you are an accountant, this is true?" Rick asked hastily, intervening to relieve the tension that suddenly hung over the table like a cloudy day. "Yes, I was released from rehab and went to college to get a business degree. That's where I met Janice. Now I'm a forensic accountant and I work for my father," Tom said. "What does your father do?" Glenn asked. "He's in charge of Jackson's specialized investigations. Works mostly for corporations," Tom said. "I've heard about them," Rick said thoughtfully. "From what I've heard, they do their job well." They finished breakfast, making mostly small talk, but this did not help Tom, who had a very bad feeling about the whole thing. He learned to listen carefully to his instincts on the battlefield as they saved his life more than once. "Well, it looks like a beautiful day outside, Eva. Why don't you give Tom a tour of the house while we go out to the backyard?" asked Darren. "Of course," Eva answered. Tom looked at Janice and tried to guess her thoughts, but couldn't. She had the kind of expression on her face that he wouldn't want to play poker with. "Come on, honey. Everything will be fine," she said encouragingly but a little tensely. "Yes, okay," said Tom. He was uncomfortable in this situation, but he felt that there was little he could do now, so he gave in to Darren and Janice. Intelligence and diligence, he told himself, grabbing his cane. He looked at Eve. "Are you ready, Tom?" she asked, with a vivacity that he knew was false. "Of course," Tom answered, hoping that the churning in his stomach would subside. "After you," Janice put her hand on his shoulder before he left, and he stopped and looked at her. "Just remember that I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Tom said. He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned away, shocked and humiliated. Tom retreated and walked away, saying nothing, until he and Eve were far from the main house. Tom couldn't help but notice the heavily armed guards nearby. Turning his back to Eve, Tom pulled out his phone and activated the voice recording app, noticing that it somehow had 2 bars, a weak signal but enough to make a call. He then put it in his pocket. "It's so beautiful here," Eve finally said, to break the ice. "Yes," Tom answered evasively. They walked to a wooden park bench overlooking a small pond and stopped. Eve sat down, and Tom followed suit. "What's going on here?" he asked. "You are a smart man, Tom. Why don't you figure this out yourself?" she asked in response. "I have an idea, but it's too terrible to think about," Tom replied. "Why don't you just confess everything to me?" Eve began. "Fine, as you know, Janice has been selected as Darren's next executive assistant," Eve began. "Yes, I already know that. Janice told me about it, but that's not all, is it?" "Yes," said Eve. "Your life is about to change, Tom. Whether this is for the better will depend on how you react. You know Janice loves you, don't you? I heard her say that, but to be honest, I find it hard to believe now. Trust me, she really loves you, and she wants the best for the two of you. That's why she's willing to do whatever it takes to guarantee your future, Eve lectured. You support your wife in her career goals, don't you? Certainly, that's what I've always done, Tom said. He felt the same as he had one night many years ago as he slowly made his way across the ground, scanning the sand for mines under the high-tech heat-dissipating cloak. I'm glad to hear this from you. Then you must understand that the next year or two will only be a minor obstacle, a bump in the road to a long, happy marriage. A year or two. She mentioned 6 months. Why are you saying this? What will happen in the next 2 years? Tom asked meaningfully. And what exactly is your role in all this? I'll get to it. My role is to prepare you for what's to come and to make sure you fully understand and accept Darren's expectations for you and your wife. Why should I care about Darren's expectations of me? I don't report to him, and he doesn't sign my paycheck, Tom growled, his patience running out. No, he doesn't do that, but he signs for her, in your tacit consent. This will make Janice's job a lot easier, Eve explained. Silent agreement? What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male, Eve stated as if it were as obvious as a giant flashing red neon sign. In other words, he's a self-absorbed narcissist, Tom growled. Eve grinned, and it was the first sincere sound she made, and the first one he believed. Let's say he expects people to obey, do what is expected of them. This also applies to Janice and, as a result, you. In other words, he wants my wife, and expects me to just accept it. Isn't that what you want to tell me? His temperature rising, but for now it is under strict control. I wouldn't use such terminology, but essentially, yes. In fact, they were already there. Intimate, several times, Eve said, noticing the pained expression on Tom's face. And you know this, where? Asked Tom. I was there. I recorded this, Eve said in an even tone. Would you like to watch something from the video? You're joking, right? Not at all, Tom. Here, take a look. You might find this interesting, Eve said, handing Tom her phone. He watched a short video clip. This is interesting. Do you mind if I save a copy? Tom asked. This would be useful to him during a divorce, he thought. Not at all. I saved this clip especially for you using the phone's Bluetooth function. Tom saved a copy to his phone. Tell me something, Tom. How has your personal life been lately? Not that it's any of your damn business, but it's been practically non-existent for the last couple of months. Why did you ask? Actually, it's my business. And the reason for this is simple. Darren instructed Janice to keep you away most of the time. He takes great care of his property. What? And she just went along with it? Tom growled through clenched teeth, his anger growing. Certainly. Now he is her owner. She obeys him in the same way as all his previous assistants obeyed him. And he will expect you to report to him too, Tom shuddered at the word master. He can wait in one hand and shit in the other. Let's see which one fills up first, Tom growled through clenched teeth. He saw the smirk on her face and wanted to wipe it away with the back of his hand. So, what does he expect from me? Money, hardly ever, grinned Eve. He expects obedience from you, your submission. And he will expect you to publicly demonstrate this tonight in front of the other senior partners. What are you talking about? What does he expect from me? The dynamics of your marriage will change dramatically while Janice is in her current position. To reflect this, Darren has documents that you must sign. These documents state that you voluntarily transfer your marital rights, property, and assets to him while Janice is his assistant. After he gets his way from you, he'll expect you to kneel before him in front of your wife and everyone else. I know it's hard to hear, but Janice expects that from you. In fact, she can't wait to see how you do it. Thus, you will give him all the power in your marriage for as long as he deems fit. Let me see if I understood what you just said correctly. In front of Janice and other executives? Are you kidding me? Tom growled. I'm not kidding, Tom. And yes, that's what he wants. And Janice too, of course. The entire meeting will be filmed, certainly. In my opinion, this looks like extortion or blackmail. Coming from you, it sounds so tasteless. But that would be used to keep you in line, Eve said nonchalantly. After you submit to him early tomorrow morning, they will leave for New York, where they will spend the weekend. Where will I be while they are in New York? Tom asked. You will stay here, locked in your room. You will be fed and looked after. When they return, you will take Janice back to your residence. You will follow her instructions exactly, without asking questions, Eva replied. So, if I understand you correctly, I must literally be held captive here against my will? And what will I get from this? If you go along with Darren's program, you will emerge relatively unscathed, except for a little humiliation. And when he's done with Janice, you'll be well compensated. And I understand that you and my soon-to-be ex-wife are conspiring to destroy my marriage, to take away my life's work. Am I right? I wouldn't put it quite like that, but I guess from your point of view, yes, we worked on this together, Eve said in a neutral tone. Did he do this with his other assistants? Tom asked. Yes, said Eva. And they went along with this crap. They did? Tom exclaimed. In fact, it gave the husbands great pleasure. What harm will it do? Tom hissed. And you can tell that if he tries to attack me, I'll do everything in my power to make sure it's the last thing he ever does. I understand you're angry, Tom, and you have every right to be. But in the end, you would win in many ways, not just one. What if I don't agree with all this crap? Let's just say you wouldn't like the consequences, Eve said. Some tried to fight Darren and ended up penniless, and those convicted of intimate crimes ended up in prison. Not a very pleasant existence. That sounds like a threat, Tom replied. Call it what you want. Fine. I'll do that, Tom replied, taking his phone out of his pocket. He stopped, saved the audio, and went through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. Once he was sure there was a signal, he selected the number he wanted, then raised the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Eve asked, her face turning red with anger. Tom smiled and put a finger to his lips, indicating that she should remain silent. Sheriff Jackson, the man said when he answered Tom's call. Uncle Bob, how are you doing? Asked Tom. Stonewall, what's happened? Dad was right. I need an extraction, fast. Do you have an address? I understand, son. I also have the coordinates from your phone. What's your plan of action? I counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There is a gate at the entrance. The code is 6973, unless they changed it last night. Hanson and 3 of his managers are here, as well as Eve Carson. She simply outlined the situation to me, so to speak. I recorded all this on audio. I'll send it to you, Tom said. Acknowledged, Bob replied. We're on our way. Estimated time of arrival is approximately 5 minutes. Can you last that long? I think so, Uncle Bob. As long as you're willing to call it self-defense, Tom said, and thanks with pleasure. I wouldn't want anything to happen to my beloved nephew. What about Janice? According to Coach Hanson, she is an accomplice and already available, Tom said. I'm sorry to hear that, son, Bob said sadly. Yes, me too, said Tom. Well, young man, you're doing great. We'll be there soon. With these words, Tom ended the conversation and then sent the audio file to his uncle. What did you just do? Asked the frightened Eve after Tom hung up. Who did you just call? I called the cavalry, Tom answered with a smile. I need to get back into the house and warn the others, Eve muttered, clearly disoriented by the turn of events. Tom shook his head and carefully sat her back down on the bench. She stared with horror and admiration at his sniper expression. I think not. We'll sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes. This may be the last sunlight you'll see for a while, Tom said, allowing himself to smile with satisfaction. I think you may have bitten off a little more than you can chew this time. Darren Ryan said, after Janice and the 4 men took their place next to the large pool behind Darren's house. Why? Because Cold Janice is a former Marine? Big deal, Darren chuckled. What's he going to do anyway? He's alone, unarmed, and surrounded by a small platoon of armed guards. If he rejects Eve's offer, then we move on to plan B, Rick warned. Don't worry, Darren said. I have everything under control. We'll give him a drink tonight, and when the time comes, he'll be more than happy to satisfy me. I can't wait to see this, Janice said. Just don't push him too hard, Ryan said. He's not like the others. They were weak. This one's different. They're all the same, Ryan, Darren grinned. No, that's not true. This guy is a combat marine, trained to kill. You must be ready for anything. Calm down, Ryan. I'll deal with it, Darren grumbled. But I'm curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's service? He asked Janice. Well, everything's as Tom said. He never told me any details, Janice replied. All he could say is that he served in the army. It doesn't matter, Darren snorted. He's going down tonight, and your career will take off. What's that sound? Glenn asked, looking around. Everyone fell silent and listened. The characteristic sounds of helicopters were heard around them. Suddenly, one of Darren's guards ran up to the pool. We have a problem, Mr. Hansen, he said irritably. What is it? Asked Darren. They heard screams and the sounds of men fighting. Then they saw two police officers in uniform and body armor walking towards the pool with rifles drawn. Stand down, ordered one of the sheriff's deputies. Drop your weapon, the deputy told Darren's guard, who immediately obeyed. More sheriff's deputies entered, handcuffing Janice, Darren, and the other three men. What's happening? Darren demanded, seeking an answer. I'll take your badges for this, sheriff's deputy said, before reading a detailed list of charges. He ended by reading their rights. Sheriff's deputies led all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. Officers were everywhere, escorting handcuffed and disarmed security officers to the bus. Janice saw Tom standing next to a large man in a khaki uniform. What's happening? She screamed. Your little party is over, Janice, Tom said calmly. Sorry, I forgot about good manners. Janice, this is Sheriff Robert Jackson. You remember my Uncle Bob, don't you? Uncle Bob? Janice gasped weakly. I didn't know you were the sheriff. It must have slipped your mind, Bob said with a grin. Tom, please. This is all a big misunderstanding. You have to believe me, Janice exclaimed in despair. No, Janice. I don't have to believe you. In fact, I don't think I've ever been more shocked and disappointed in my life. I'll visit my lawyer as soon as possible to file for divorce. From now on, you're dead to me, Tom said firmly. You understand? With these words, Tom grabbed her left hand and took off the rings, putting them in his pocket. You son of a, Darren growled, trying unsuccessfully to break free from the hands of the 2 sheriff's deputies holding him. I'll be out of prison in no time, and then I'll kill you. Can you hear me, you piece of? That sounds like a threat to me. What do you think, Uncle Bob? Tom asked with a smirk that surpassed all of Darren's previous anger. Of course, it sounded like that to me too, said Bob. We'll just add it to all the other charges against him. That'll help ensure he's never released on bail. Don't worry, Mr. Hansen. My boys will take good care of you, he chuckled. And your friends, take these people and get out of here, he ordered the sheriff's deputies, who immediately obeyed. Tom and Bob watched as the criminals were loaded onto the bus. It seemed to Tom that the last few years of his life had been a lie. He loved Janice from the moment they met. Bob patted him on the shoulder. Everything will work out, son. Trust me on this, he said. Bob had gone through a divorce from an unfaithful wife many years ago and knew the pain Tom was experiencing. Thank you, Uncle Bob, for all. You're welcome, son. If you need anything, call me. And tell your dad I said hi. I think he has a bottle of his best wine waiting for your visit, Bob interrupted. I will do so. Is it safe for me to pick up my belongings? I need to get the hell out of here. Certainly. I think they're almost done inside this place anyway, Bob told him. After they said goodbye, Tom packed his things and went home. After meeting with his father, Tom met with the family lawyer and filed divorce papers in accordance with the prenuptial agreement they signed before their wedding. He waited until they were served before visiting Janice in the county jail. "This will be the first and only time I visit you, Janice," he said as she took her seat. "By law, I have to make sure you have these documents." "I took them," Janice said quietly. "I already signed them and sent them back." "Fine, as I'm sure you can see, I followed the prenuptial agreement. I'll wait until your trial is over to get rid of your things." "I appreciate it," Janice said. "There's something I don't understand." "How did you know?" "You'll hear the gory details in court, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version," Tom began. "I suspected something was going on a couple of months before that weekend, but I had no proof. About 4 months before that memorable day, the ex-husband of one of Darren's so-called assistants approached Dad with a rather wild story. He also brought several spreadsheets and documents that his ex-wife obtained from Darren's system. Dad made me look through the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't tell you anything about privileges, conflicts of interest, and the like. It took some time, but we finally found what we were looking for: evidence of all sorts of nefarious financial dealings with some pretty shady characters. Your lover did a great job of hiding them, but not well enough. A couple of weeks before that weekend, Dad turned over everything he had to the feds, who were more than interested in Hanson's affairs. In fact, they were planning to raid your offices sometime in June, Dad said. I had to be very careful that weekend. He conveyed what his interlocutor had told him, although it was very difficult for him to believe it. We talked to my uncle, Bob, who, as you know, is the sheriff of the county where Darren's property is located. I hoped nothing would happen, but that's not how it worked. Eve Carson told me what you and your lover were planning. By the way, I recorded this little conversation. I'm glad we live in a state that only requires one party's permission to make a recording like this. However, I have a few questions for you. What do you want to know? Janice asked. How long before that weekend did you sleep with your so-called master? About 2 months, Janice answered. Tom was surprised that she was so frank. It was around this time that things started to go wrong for us. Was he the one who told you to intercept my communications? Yes, she said quietly, her face turning red. Then maybe I should get tested for diseases, Tom said, causing Janice even more embarrassment. Of course, you knew that I would never agree to this of my own free will. I'd rather die first. So why? Because I was so in love with Darren that I would agree to anything he wanted. You do not understand, she said. He liked the feeling of power over everyone around him. What if I didn't obey? He had what he called Plan B, Janice admitted. Do you mean prohibited substances? Yes. They found a vial that he intended to use against me. I have nothing to do with this, Janice said. That's interesting because they found your prints all over the bottle, Tom said, causing Janice to look at him in shock. Which tells me you were part of his plot against me. No. I never wanted to hurt you, she sobbed. The evidence suggests otherwise, Janice. You didn't just cheat on me, you plotted with your so-called master to destroy me as a man. So, there's no turning back. No forgiveness. Nothing. Like I told you that day, you're dead to me, Tom hissed as Janice shed hot tears but didn't flinch. I've already wasted enough time on you. Goodbye, Janice. Enjoy what's left of your miserable life, he said as he stood up and left, immune to her tears. After several court appearances, Janice, Darren, Eve, and others were found guilty of all charges brought against them. As the ringleader, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, meaning he would never be paroled. Having played minor roles in Darren's illegal financial schemes, the 3 executives were sentenced to 20 years in prison. Ava and Janice received slightly lighter sentences. Several other employees of the firm were charged for their roles in the conspiracy. Several people supported the state's testimony against Darren and were given immunity as part of a plea deal. By the time the smoke cleared, Remington Law Group no longer existed. Tom's divorce from Janice went quickly and without a hitch because of Janice's imprisonment. Tom packed up all of her belongings and placed them in storage so that her parents could pick them up at their convenience. On the 4th of July, Tom, his father, and Bob celebrated Independence Day like the rest of the nation with a barbecue and fireworks. Bob brought a guest to the celebration and introduced her to Tom. He was instantly captivated by the attractive, slender, brown-eyed brunette standing in front of him and found it hard not to stare at her toned legs highlighted by a pair of short denim shorts. "Son, this is Mara Simmons. She just moved here from Dallas and started working with me a couple of weeks ago." "Are you a sheriff's deputy?" Tom asked. "Of course," Mara said with a confident smile lighting up her face. "She's a former Marine too," Bob said. "Member of Parliament, like your father, Mara." "My nephew also served in the Corps, sniper from Force Reconnaissance," Bob added. "Semper Fi," Mara answered. "Tom," she continued, "I think you and I will get along great." Tom broke into a wide smile. "I think so too," Mara agreed. "Will you buy the girl a beer?" "Of course," Tom answered. "I wouldn't mind having something fresh myself." He took 2 beers from his father's refrigerator and handed one to her. "Your uncle told me about your last operation." "Sounds great," Mara said as they sat down. "I'm sorry for what you went through with your ex," Tom remarked quietly. "Yeah, okay." "I think this happens," Tom remarked quietly. "The divorce will soon be final." "What about you?" "I saw the mark on your ring finger." "Were you married too?" "Yes, I was," Mara said. "Obviously, my husband wasn't like that, if you know what I mean. One evening, I came home early and found him in bed with his secretary. In my bed, no less." "I'm sorry to hear it." "If you ask me, he was an idiot," Tom told her, looking at her figure. "I agree," said Mara. "I'm just glad we didn't have children." "Do you have children?" "Fortunately, no. We talked about starting a family, and then everything went to hell." Tom and Mara talked most of the evening and were delighted when Bob and Tom's father set off fireworks. By the end of the evening, Tom felt much better. At least he believed he had met a kindred spirit in Mara. "Are you ready to go back, Mara?" Bob asked after they finished the fireworks. "I think now is a good time," she remarked before turning to Tom. "I had a wonderful time, Tom." "It was very nice to meet you." "I had a wonderful time too, Mara, and I'm very glad that I met you. Actually, I'd like to see you again, if that's okay." "That would be more than good, Tom," she said with a wide smile on her face. "Here's my number," she added, handing him a card with her cell phone number. "Your uncle doesn't let me get bored, but on Saturday evenings, I'm usually free. Call me." "It will be done," Tom said, returning her smile. He took her card, noticing his uncle's wink and smile. "I'll call you this Thursday, then." "Let's talk," Mara said before kissing him on the cheek. They said goodbye and left. "Nice young lady," Tom's father said after they left. "Yes, very sweet," Tom said with a wide smile. "I hope you intend to keep your promise to her," said the elderly man. "Absolutely," said Tom. "Good boy," his father said, patting Tom on the back. "Come on, help me clean up and let's see if we can drink the rest of this beer." "Are you going to give me the day off tomorrow to sleep it off, Dad?" Tom asked. "Hell no," his father replied with a laugh. Laughing in response, Tom joined his father, thinking about the cute brunette with the prettiest legs he had seen in a long time. "What do you think of our history today?" "I think it was clear from the start that the wife was acting inappropriately and that she was a cheater. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.